What's going on, guys? Today's an important day for the market. We have the Fed meeting coming to its conclusion today. The market is basically unanimously expecting no rate cut, leaving rates current. It's basically a 99.5% chance. Now, one thing that's shown here in this article is Bitcoin. You can see that there's some clear divergences on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is double topping here, while the RSI is cooling down, while other indicators as well are cooling down. And you can see while Bitcoin has maintained the same resistance, the RSI has been cooling down, unable to break over this resistance. Bitcoin is at a pretty crucial point, and it's setting up for either a breakout or a breakdown after the Fed's announcement. You can see that Bitcoin has been maintaining this roughly $100,000 important support, trying to make 100,000 to be the new 90,000, as I said in my previous video. We're also facing a descending resistance. We have been finding this as resistance for about 4 or 5 days now. Let me show you what happened to Bitcoin on the last Fed meeting. The last Fed meeting was on December 18. We did sell off. And that was on a meeting with the rate cut. Why did we sell off? Well, it's because the market was expecting, one, less rate cuts this year, and two, we started seeing inflation ticking up again, seeing some worrying signs from CPI, PPI, PCE. We essentially have been range bound from the last Fed meeting. It's very clear this meeting that we aren't getting a rate cut. What's going to be very important to listen to is the Fed's tone, the Fed's words. Now, I wanted to pull up the Fed's dot plot. This is basically where its Fed members expect rates to go. Each dot represents one Fed's anticipated rate direction. You can see that by the year end, by the end of 2025, the median, which is the average expected, is a 3.75 to a 4% interest rate, which is essentially 2 cuts by the end of the year. And because inflation has been so untransitory, I know that's not a word, but I'm just trying to poke fun at the Fed for saying inflation was transitory in the first place. But because of this, we have quite a long multi-year rate cutting cycle. This could change if inflation started ticking down more. The Fed will get to their target quicker if that's the case. And one piece of data that might support this is PCE, which comes out in 2 days. If we can see it tick down from November, that'll be a very positive sign. And I think there is a good possibility, considering what we saw from PPI and CPI earlier this month. One thing about Bitcoin is it'll likely test the 50 MA if we do break this $100,000 level. But so far so good, we're trying to hold it. And while this meeting is basically 100% certainty we're not getting a cut, because there is no confusion here, I think the market already knows what to expect. We shouldn't see a sell-off because the Fed isn't going to cut rates. It's basically priced in my opinion. We might see a sell-off though, depending on what the Fed says. Now, when we go to future meetings, you'll see the possibility of a rate cut becomes higher and higher. We're a 1 in 3 chance for our upcoming meeting in March. And we're getting towards May, we're almost a 50-50, getting closer, and even an 8% chance of 2 cuts by then. Now, by the time we get into summer, it is more expected that we will have cut once by then than not, with a 1 in 4 chance of 2 cuts, and a 4 in 100 chance of 3 cuts. And as you get towards the end of the year, you'll see that the chance of leaving rates current is about a 1 in 10 chance, with more likelihood than not, but that by the end of the year, the most likely outcome is 2 rate cuts, but there is a chance of 3, small chance of 4, and a minuscule chance of more than that. It of course depends on where inflation takes us. We do have some interesting Bitcoin news, and then I'm going to look at 2 charts that I think are great buys, great opportunities to add before potential breakout on earnings season. The Czech National Bank governor is proposing a $7 billion Bitcoin reserve plan, investing up to 5% of its reserves in Bitcoin. And they may become the first European central bank to do so. And as said by Dragos, here's the significance of it. To put it in perspective, these Bitcoin purchases alone would be equivalent to around 5.3 months of newly mined, same thing though, Bitcoin supply. And this news comes only 3 weeks after its governor, Alice Mitchell, hopefully, said he was looking at Bitcoin as a potential reserve asset, considering acquiring a few Bitcoin for diversification. The bank also plans to increase their gold holdings to 5% of their total assets by 2028. And here's a part that is very inaccurate. This guy says it's very accurate. I don't know what article he's referring to because there's no mention of it before that I see. Maybe I'm blind. But it says this article is very accurate, including my statement that Bitcoin could one day be worth either 0 or a huge amount. In my opinion, there's 0 chance at this point that Bitcoin will be 0. BlackRock won't allow it. Michael Saylor won't allow it. Bitcoin is in. Bitcoin is a part of Wall Street. You can argue till the cows come home whether that's good or bad on the long term. But one thing that's good about it is, in my opinion, it means Bitcoin is not going away. It is an asset that is here to stay. In my opinion, it is one of the most valuable assets in the world because of its scarcity. There is nothing like Bitcoin. Whatever article he's referring to, I believe, is inaccurate. But let me know what you guys think. According to Raoul Paul, we've talked about this before, but Bitcoin set for a local top above 110K in January before the peak in liquidity. We're getting awful close to the end of January. Are we going to get it? This peak in liquidity may lead to a deeper correction, and he highlights potentially 70,000. I think we're going to have to test the 200 MA in the upper 70s before we get to the low 70s, if at all. But this would be a fantastic time to add some Bitcoin before we kick off the end of the cycle. Most see Bitcoin ending this year around 160 to above 180. I think 150 is a very reasonable target. Under a 50% move to get to our target. Some might say that's not bullish enough. Remember, Bitcoin doesn't just move up in a straight line. There are going to be corrections along the way. And the first month of 2025 is almost over. We are chipping away at the cycle, getting closer and closer to the end. Now, I did want to point out a few Bitcoin miners. If you didn't watch my last video, I did talk about a few others that I think are great buys here. But I want to highlight IREN and Riot today. First off, IREN is now testing its 200 MA. While we're in this overall bull run, buying under or at the 200 MA has played out to be a fantastic decision. IREN's earnings is anticipated to be around mid-February. They're expecting just a small loss in EPS, a small negative quarter, unprofitable quarter. Keep in mind, when this guidance was given, it was around the end of November. Bitcoin was a little lower in price. And looking at their revenue, they're expecting a massive revenue growth. Their last quarter was a 34 million. Quarter before that was 57 million. Before that was 54. And they have grown their revenue massively. And this is going to not only look great from a year-over-year standpoint, but also from a quarter-to-quarter standpoint. We're expecting roughly double the revenue from a year ago. And we're expecting roughly 3 times what we saw last quarter. Now, if IREN does head towards this green line, towards the high 8s, this would be a fantastic time to buy if we possibly break the 200 MA. If what the Fed says is a little concerning, perhaps we break this 200 MA and it doesn't hold, and we head down towards this green line, which in hindsight has been a fantastic time to pick up IREN as it bounces off these supports. I still have IREN reaching at least $20 this cycle. I think when the Bitcoin miners start posting profitability, it'll be very surprising how quickly they get there. And let me show you an example with IREN. Here's one quarter from IREN that saw a profitable quarter before the halving took it away. And you'll see that its price was roughly, around $4 or $5 at the time. On that good profitable quarter, it rallied up to 15, a 200% gain before selling off again, before we got back to the unprofitable quarters reflecting the halving, taking rewards away. Before the halving, we did see some profitable quarters from IREN. We saw profitable quarters from BT. We saw profitable quarters from CleanSpark, for instance. There were Bitcoin miners that were posting profitability before the halving took it away. That's something we didn't experience last cycle. The Bitcoin miners fundamentally are in a much better place than they were last cycle. And I do think price will reflect that once we see some positive earnings again, once we see that they're profitable again. One thing you'll see for IREN is the potential for a divergence. If the RSI holds here, and we don't keep selling off and break this low here, we will see a bullish divergence where the RSI is picking up, however the price is coming down. But we need to see where price goes. If IREN, the Bitcoin miners, just start selling off because of the Fed and what they say, then this bullish divergence will be invalidated, possibly break the 200 MA, head towards the 8s. Now, Riot has been in an interesting little uptrend since September. Other Bitcoin miners actually haven't been performing as well in this short-term period. But compared to others over the cycle, Riot has really been disappointing. Riot, from cycle low to here, is only up 239%. You would have been better buying off Bitcoin in this case. Having said that, if Bitcoin is able to gain 50%, I think Riot will more than double. Riot is expecting a $135 million quarter, a small loss in EPS. When their guidance was given, this was towards the end of October. Bitcoin was substantially lower in price at that time. I think the Bitcoin miners across the board are going to surprise because of when guidance was given, because of Bitcoin's price at the time, and Bitcoin ending Q4 strong. I do think they're going to see some good quarters. Where Riot's concerned is they're expecting not quite a double in revenue, but getting towards it quarter over quarter. And year over year, almost the same story, almost a double in revenue, not quite though. Now, one thing I want to show you guys is when Riot made it to profitability, it was expected to be an unprofitable quarter. They eked out a profit. Although they missed their revenue target, we got a gap up and a run from 11 to about 18, a little less than a double, not as good as IREN's performance. This was right before the halving, and the miners did start selling off in anticipation of rewards being cut. Riot has been stuck under this resistance for what seems like forever, and I do think once we break out of it, for one, we're following this ascending support, unless it breaks, which would be a negative. But I do think we're going to tighten up until we get our breakout, and earnings is right here towards the end of this pattern. There are a lot of Bitcoin miners that have this same pattern, keep an eye on them, but once earnings starts coming out good, we're going to see these breaks of resistances, and this is when we kick off the end of the cycle. This is when we kick off the latter part of the bull run for these Bitcoin miners. When these break out, when these are running to insane prices, you want to take profits. You don't want to buy into them. A lot of the people that are complaining about I mean, Riot's not a good example because it didn't do that great, so it's fair to complain. But a lot of people that are complaining about these Bitcoin miners, you know, they were buying when they were overbought. They were buying when these things were breaking out. They were buying when they were getting attention. People didn't want to buy Riot when it was $3. People didn't want to buy Riot when it was $4 or $5. When these Bitcoin miners break out and rally, you don't necessarily want to chase them. Buying shares and selling covered calls could be a good move, but you also want to keep in mind, at least in my opinion, that you want to be basically out entirely before 2025 ends. I do not want to stick around for crypto winter for these. Sure, I'll let some runners run, leave a small position just for the heck of it, especially with some of these AI plays that might have more longevity into the bear market. But you know, the Bitcoin miners are derivatives of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin starts going into its bear market, these Bitcoin miners are going to sell off horribly. When Bitcoin breaks its double top that it's at, when these Bitcoin miners start posting profitable quarters again, that is when we get these awesome breakouts. That is when the excitement rolls back in. And this is when you want to be trimming, taking profits. But thanks as always for watching, guys. Are you still buying the Bitcoin miners? Are you buying Bitcoin at these prices? It is getting later and later into the cycle. You don't want to be chasing them towards the end. These are the times to buy while they're not in favor, before we get back to that profitability. But let me know how you're feeling about the Fed meeting. What did you get out of it? As I'm uploading this, it's not out yet. Here's hoping for a positive Fed with a good outlook. After this meeting, we do have some rate cuts to look forward to. And remember, we end this month with PCE. But you know, Bitcoin adoption is happening. And I didn't mention this, but there's other states getting into Bitcoin. South Dakota is another one. Arizona is the furthest along, in my opinion. More and more states are following suit. Soon we will see half of all the states working towards a Bitcoin reserve. But what do you guys think about that? Thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you next time.